David Seaman is founder of Fulcrum News, which is an American research site. He is a journalist who was fired from the renowned Huffington Post for his groundbreaking story on Pizzagate. His continued commitment to advocating for civil liberties is a benchmark for journalism, and we welcome you, David, most heartily to this Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Human Trafficking and Child Sex Abuse. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for making this a focus. Of course, even the White House has published an executive order going into how widespread human trafficking is, what an epidemic it is, and there was just an article in the New York Post about how this is happening right underneath of people's noses on a scale that is frankly hard to fathom.
In my humble opinion, Pizzagate and the awareness that people like you, led by you, raised is what opened the public's mind. So with that, I turn it over to you. Tell us what you think we need to know.
Thank you so much, Robert. I know you come from an organization that at one point in time had pledged to deceive all of us, right? Deceive all of us as the real state of the world. And then the Podesta emails come out in the days before the U.S. election in 2016, in late 2016, these emails just come out seemingly out of nowhere, like the Twilight Zone. We only have a few days to pour through them, those of us in the research community, with the group of researchers that became Fulcrum News. We only had a few days to pour through this stuff, and it wasn't just me and my team, but I was seemingly one of the only people in the U.S. who were behind some kind of media bubble or some kind of media blockade that did not want to talk about the contents of Podesta's emails at all. They did not want to talk about his emails, and I was just drawing simple conclusions about the content of those emails. Anybody in order of magnitude more busy than the average journalist or the average professional, if they're using a code language in their emails, there's always a reason why. That's just simple research work 101. If somebody is a very busy person, and their day job is organizing the presidential campaign for Hillary Clinton. If they're using a code language in their spare time, there's got to be a reason why. And so we just followed the path of least resistance, really, aside from the trolling and the character attacks from the Media Matters type people. Aside from that stuff, we just followed the path of least resistance, and we just followed Occam's razor as researchers. And that brings us to the present day. So thank you all very much. And again, we were behind some kind of blockade. I mean, Europe knew this stuff was not only possible, it's par for the course, right? Jimmy Savile and the BBC having kind of covered up for him, and even the royal family having given him a degree of legitimacy he should not have had. So Europe was open to this pedophilia stuff, the fact that it exists, unfortunately, that child abuse is widespread at the top levels of society. The Catholic Church, another predominantly European scandal. Europe knows it exists. Asia, I think by default, knows the world is a very corrupt place. And in the US, we've been living behind some kind of Alice in Wonderland facade, like we're living in a Norman Rockwell painting. And no, we're living in like the opening scene of the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, so very, very interesting. This is finally blown open again. Even the New York Post talking about how it's an epidemic. And now I'll leave it up to all of you. Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming and giving some testimony in relation to this to the court. What I'd really like to know is, and I think you're clearly at the centre of it, is to really understand the scale of this problem at the highest levels. Obviously, we've got some limitations on the use of names. But if you could give us some idea of the scale and the magnitude, the methodology, and if you have the time as well, to just give us an idea of how to follow the money.
Sure. I'm not an expert in any of those areas, but just broadly, I would have to say that what emerged is that the ruling families connected to the banking system, again, I'm just giving the broad strokes here. There are people on your commission who are more expert in this area and have worked in some of these intelligence agencies that were responsible for doing this, and they probably have much more to say on it than I do. But just broadly, there were these ruling families due to their roles within the banking system and within the oil industry to a lesser extent. They become very wealthy over a short period of time. Compound interest, as it turns out, is one of the wonders of the world. When you're one of the ruling banking families, you can make so much money within a couple generations. And things go in a very sinister direction where they kind of co-opt these cults that had existed for a very long time. A cable network in the US, AHC, which is owned by Discovery Networks, which owns the Discovery Channel, and many other content providers in the US. AHC aired an hour-long special called Inside the Cult of Satan about how this pre-biblical cult, of which child abuse and human sacrifice is simply a part of what they do, has been operating underground for centuries, and more recently has kind of peeked its head up in the form of institutionalized human trafficking and political elites being compromised by this stuff. So to get back to what I was saying, the broad stroke here, I think, is that these banking families, in collusion maybe with the intelligence agencies, I don't quite know how this happened, began brownstoning or pedophying a number of elected leaders, just either selecting for leaders who are already perverts and deviants, selecting them because they can be compromised easily, and then giving them, the money and resources to seek national office, or in some cases just using that as a blackmail component. If you want to get access to this stuff, well, then you have to become a member of the club, and this is how we control you. And so this was used as a means of control, because we live in a postmodern age where just photographing somebody smoking a joint or photographing somebody engaged in extramarital marriage, it's not what it was in the 1960s. Nobody cares. So they had to go much deeper down the rabbit hole of human depravity. And as a result, as these WikiLeaks emails showed, we have US political elites who in their spare time, for whatever reason, are using a language that's known to federal law enforcement to be used by child traffickers. And we do know there are, occult connections. Spirit cooking is done by many US celebrities. And it's overtly occult. It's overtly satanic. So that's really the broad strokes of what our research has popularized with the help of many others. So,
thank you very much.
Is it your understanding that John Podesta was fished by a Romanian taxi driver? And that is what led to the revelation of all of his Google emails.
Sorry, could you explain what fished means?
He was faked into giving his password. If you could spend 5 minutes talking about what you actually drew out of those emails.
Thank you. Yeah, so first of all, I have not had a chance to review the details on that video yet. My initial call is that it's probably a fake, that they're kind of frontlining. What they're doing is they're frontlining this whole story by putting out a fake, which then they can debunk easily, and then people go, oh, it's BS. And then round two, when the real thing drops, half the population goes, oh no, I saw on Comedy Central that was just a fake. So it kind of muddies the waters. I think that's what they're doing. Again, I could be wrong. I haven't looked into it fully. But my initial call is that it's probably a fake. And we know just recently the mainstream media, so-called mainstream, they were publishing articles in unison saying, if you see something on video, can you really believe it? Videos can be fake nowadays. Okay, if we're living in that postmodern kind of world, then we don't even need journalism, right? We don't even need the New York Times. We don't even need video. We don't even need this commission. We don't need to do anything if you can't even trust video. And if you can't even trust a bank balance on a screen, then we're living in postmodern absurdity from some French novel, right? So of course, you can trust what's on a video. If it's in HD and you can prove that the shadows are coming from certain angles and that it's, a genuine light source and not some kind of CGI nonsense, absolutely you can trust video. And so I think they're very scared of the fact that the turned NSA, the NSA that is loyal to Trump and loyal to this, resurgence of nationalism and truth, they're terrified the NSA is sitting on, a lot of dirty stuff. Many nasty films have been exchanged by elites over the internet, over the past decade, and the NSA has all of it. So that's where I stand on the video. And then the Podesta emails, this is actually the most viewed video on our BitChute channel. It was massively viral on our YouTube channel. YouTube is owned by Google. So this 8-minute mini documentary we put together, the budget was about $10,000. Part of what that involved was just putting together this professional quality mini documentary. And in a short amount of time before the new year, because that's when we wanted to release it for maximum impact, it came out. And this mini documentary had more than 200,000 views. I believe it was 225,000 views on our YouTube channel before they banned us on YouTube. When they banned us, one of the results of that was that they wiped all 505 of our videos. One of those was that video. We luckily have a backup on our BitChute channel, bitchute.com/channel/Fulcrum News. And if you just click on the most popular video that's been uploaded there so far, it is that 8-minute mini doc that goes into the Podesta emails. Here you have this Hillary Clinton campaign chairman who was the White House chief of staff under Bill Clinton, very powerful and busy guy, using this code language of pizza and hot dogs. It recurs again and again. It keeps recurring. I don't know what the source of the email leak was. I do believe he was phished by somebody. I believe somebody sent him a fake password reset email that said, hey, John Podesta, pick a new password. And he types in something. Then they have his new password. And that's how I believe they got in. I don't know who did it or their intentions, but somehow these emails, which are genuine, he has not denied that they're his emails. These genuine emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman end up on WikiLeaks for millions of us to sift through. Just days before the US presidential election, there's this panicked push to call it fake news. And this is when I knew something was deeply wrong, because I had just begun to cover it. And then out of nowhere, I'm getting these trolls, these character attack people saying things about me and drawing conclusions from my past, like just a full-blown character attack. And I'm like, whoa, there's something going on here. It's like I was thrown into an Aaron Brockovich movie all of a sudden, like there's something up here that I'm just putting out a couple of pieces of internet content and suddenly my whole world is falling down. Like, what on earth is this? And I had been publishing for years online for various outlets, and I'd never seen anything like that, even back in the days of talking about the NSA openly and some of the programs that Edward Snowden had outed. I would go into that stuff, experience nothing like this. And so I knew that that was a red flag. That was a tell. If you're a poker player, that was a big tell that there's something here. And then the other thing, aside from the banning of the YouTube channel and the Twitter ban, there's just been so much censorship around this whole topic of Pizzagate. And we've had everybody from Comedy Central to the New York Times to the Washington Post just, again, frontline and say Pizzagate is debunked fake news. It's very dangerous. It can hurt real people. It's very dangerous. Stay away from it. And you're like, wait a second. Hold on. It debunked by whom? Debunked by whom? What government agency? What law enforcement official? Which agency anywhere has said this is debunked, this is not real? We have no idea what John Podesta, at the very least, we have no idea what John Podesta is talking about in his emails. And more probably, we know exactly what he's talking about, because again, there are people in federal law enforcement who, when these emails came out, they went, "Oh my God, John Podesta appears to be into child trafficking." So somewhere along the lines, the wires got crossed, and they began just pedophiling political elites, these wealthy families who finance some of our presidential contenders, families like the Rothschilds, I believe. Things got really messed up. And now, because John Podesta is a dummy from a technological perspective and typed his password in and gave it to some hacker, some identity theft person, we don't know who it was necessarily, because he did that, which, by the way, was a derivative. We know it was a derivative of the word password, right? Password using the @ symbol, etc., instead of the letter A. Because of that fluke of nature, that fluke of fate, we now have a different timeline in history where this cabal of weirdos who are into sexual perversion They all have to face the light of day thanks to the internet and thanks to internet researchers and thanks to commissions like yours.
Chief Justice?
Just one simple question. You were sacked from the Huffington Post. Is there any future for that publication? Any credibility now?
I think pretty much the whole mainstream media is, as Pizzagate goes out wider and wider, the whole mainstream media is done. I mean, you had Comedy Central mocking it as fake news. You had the CBS evening comedy host Stephen Colbert mocking it as dangerous fake news. You had the New York Times and the Washington Post both received Pulitzers this year, just recently. That's recent news. The Washington Post and the New York Times, or as our president calls them, the failing New York Times and the fake Washington Post, they both received Pulitzer Prizes for their work unearthing the Russia collusion story, which, by the way, if it were 100% true, is not even a felony, right? If Donald Trump spent every night pre-election in a hot tub with Vladimir Putin and stacks of $100 bills, simply not a felony, right? Simply not something that you can bar somebody from office over, not a felony that they were investigating, and they award them Pulitzers. It was trumped up. It was fake news created by Hillary's people. And the days after her election loss, they were stunned by the election loss. Her backers wanted to know, how is this possible? How did we lose this thing? And they pointed to, well, it must have been Russia. So they shouldn't be getting Pulitzers. They should be shut down. They should be shut down for malfeasance, for professional malfeasance. Meanwhile, Pizzagate bubbles up thanks to internet researchers, thanks to the decentralized nature of internet media. Pizzagate keeps bubbling up, and they keep trying to suppress it at the New York Times and the Washington Post and places like BuzzFeed and Newsweek. So I think all those brands are pretty much done. As this goes viral, It's like they tried to cover up Watergate. They're not going to have a future.
Yeah, no, thank you for answering that. The reason for my question was I was asked to write an article for the Huffington Post, but I think you've just saved me a lot of typing time.
Perhaps you should.
David, there are people like you and Nafiz Ahmed, who I admire very much. He's written for The Guardian, and now he's writing for Insurgent or something. But there are people like you that have found it difficult to get the truth out. And I understand now that there's a move to create an Internet 3.0. I coined the term #Google Gestapo. There are no fewer than 10 YouTube alternatives based on blockchain. What is your vision of how the Internet is going to evolve so that people like you cannot be censored or digitally assassinated?
That's a good question. I think we're at a point right now where the internet censorship from the big three or four social media pipelines, it's gotten so bad and so overt. Certain topics like Pizzagate and certain topics like simply being a conservative, simply praising the president. These are topics.
Boycotting Israel.
Yeah, anything that's politically unpopular, going after Israel, going after the Rothschilds, talking about George Soros, even mentioning his name on Twitter is, you're liable to get a temporary ban. It's spooky stuff. And so I think we're at a state where if you want to be heard, if you want to fully exercise your First Amendment, you've got to be doing it from your own website. Fulcrum, that's our own website. Companies like InfoWars, they would be nowhere if they didn't also have their own websites where they're pushing out information aside from the rigged platforms. We got to play in the big sandbox, which is, Facebook. We got to play in the big sandbox of Google and YouTube until they ban you, because that's where the masses are, right? That's the public forum. But we don't have to stay there. Once you build up an audience, get the heck out as soon as possible with your audience to somewhere where you're not going to be banned, your own website, where you can keep growing it. I think that's part of where blockchain stuff will probably come in. It's showing promise as a way to host some of these videos and as a way to keep people making money outside of the PayPal Gestapo. You talk about the Google Gestapo. What about payments? All payments run through a handful of companies, MasterCard, Visa, and PayPal, a couple others. And if you're doing something they don't like, they can really come after you for no reason. So that's where things like Bitcoin that are not freezable for any intents and purposes, things like that become really useful to true researchers and to the truth community, because a PayPal ban will hit you when you least expect it and when your organization can least afford it, right? That's when it'll hit you. So that's where blockchain becomes useful.
Let me just follow up on that. If I were, for example, to be able to give you $1 million next week, just to focus your thinking, how would you spend it?
Well, we're already spending money, believe it or not, on Facebook. People laugh at us and are like, why are you spending on Facebook? We highly target our video views through our Facebook channel, our Facebook page. Our video views are highly targeted. Right now, the average, it's costing us between 1/6 of 1 penny to 1 penny, 1 whole penny, to reach a real person in the US or Canada who's highly targeted, either a person who's liked our page in the past, which means they're open to independent news, or a friend of a friend who has liked our page, which means at least they know somebody who's red-pilled, at least they know somebody who's awake to the realities in our world. So I would boost our Facebook spend. I would just work on expanding what we have on the ground here in DC. And then I would also work on expanding our redundancy, having some kind of app that we control that people can download from the App Store and download from the Android Play Store, where, you know, if things get real bad and the censorship is out of control, as it was a couple months ago, the people will still get alerts the second we have a new article or a new video that goes up anywhere. I think controlling that is very big for independent media. We can't even rely on Google and Facebook to send out the alerts anymore. So that's where I would spend $1 million or whatever windfall came. It would be increased advertising of our own content and immediately looking for places where we can host our videos where it just can't come down. You know, there's been some success with IPFS. I would work on that probably. And DTube has been somewhat successful. So yeah.
Thank you. I know that Justice Cleverly has a question for you.
Actually, no. I think that most of the points have been ably dealt with, but and I'm very interested in your views on the future of internet, cryptocurrency, how those things would join, and independence of community. And I think that Council has opened up those questions, so I think we'll proceed a little bit along that line, since that's definitely clearly an area of your knowledge. Not so much the question of what would you do if you had $1 million, but when you look at things like Medium and some of these other journalistic endeavors now, and the very fact that obviously Facebook doesn't actually pay for anyone who produces content, how do you actually see the future of that, and the way in which people can do self-generated, user-generated stories in areas such as your own, but also provide benefit for those people through cryptocurrency?
Great questions. Cryptocurrency, I think, is just very freeing in general. It's freeing even outside of internet publishing, even outside of freedom of speech issues. It's so freeing to have currency that by design, nobody can freeze it, nobody can stop it. You know, no matter how much money you put in your checking account, at least in the United States, somebody through ID theft, they can take your money. You know, they can drain you dry, and then you'll be made whole again after the FBI looks into it and after the judge signs off on it in 6 months or a year. You'll get your money back from Mexico or wherever, maybe, right? Best case scenario, maybe you'll get your money back. Having some crypto gives people this modern day certainty that nothing else provides except for gold and silver. And those don't provide much certainty because, as other people have pointed out, when you hoard gold, somebody can just bang you over the head and take your gold, and that's that. But with the password protection of crypto, with the discrete, very discrete nature of it, the fact that you can store $20 million on a USB drive this big, and then password protect it with something in your own mind. I mean, that starts to get the imagination going about what is money, right? How does money function? And now we have this digital money in the form of Bitcoin, where there's at least 60 million people using it off and on, 60 million people. And it seems like regardless of what the price has done lately, the number of people learning about it and using it keeps growing and growing. So I think it's great just as independence from the banks, because at the height of covering Pizzagate, I was frozen by PayPal twice. And eventually we were able to get all of our money, and we were unfrozen. But to have 2 freezes when that account was a decade old and it had no issues beforehand when I was buying stuff on eBay and all that, no issues there. But the second I'm covering this hot button issue that makes the DNC and the Podesta group look really bad, 2 PayPal freezes out of nowhere, that shows you the system cannot be trusted. And so for everybody who's at the fringes and for everybody who's pushing back, you need financial independence. If they can just freeze your checking account, then you don't have a voice, right? So for anybody who's an independent journalist, I don't say this is financial advice, I say this is life advice. Make sure you have some crypto or some asset that cannot be turned off with the flip of a switch when you start to put the heat on some of these people, you know? So that's my spiel on crypto. More broadly, it's exciting because you can decentralize video uploads. So the YouTube issue of they can just delete a video, that goes away because once something's up on IPFS, from what I understand, it never goes away. It's always somewhere, and it can always be recalled if it's needed by someone else on the network. So all that stuff is pretty interesting.
Chief Justice would like to ask one question.
You just raised something that I hadn't considered before when you mentioned your PayPal had been blocked on 2 occasions. Is there any truth in the rumour that the United States government is legislating to ban the use of large denominational notes in cash and forcing people when they enter transactions above a certain amount to use the existing banking system so they can keep track of how much money people are spending, with the aim then of working out how much money people are actually earning and taxing them on it?
That's already the direction things are headed in. The banks want people using cash as little as possible. One of the big 3 banks in the US, Wells Fargo, I believe their default option, unless you call the bank and have them increase it, they're now at the point where they let you take out about $310 a day in actual cash from an ATM, $310, regardless of how much money is in your account. And other banks, there are higher limits. I have a bank account where the limit's about $1,000 a day. That's still not a lot of access to your own cash. So they're trying to definitely decrease the usage of cash, our demand for it, and keep everything on the books. They want every single transaction, even if it's just $1 coffee, they want you to swipe, they want you to tap, and they want to have a record of that forever, where you were, when you were, and then from that, who you were having coffee with, etc.
David, thank you. Forgive me, I'm going to call time on that if that's okay. Did that answer your question more or less, Chief Justice? Commissioner Hutzabout, David, is a criminologist and psychotherapist, and she would like to ask a question of you.
I would like to point out that there has been scandals in England, in Ireland, thinking of the Savile case in the United Kingdom, in France and in Belgium, and I'm from Belgium, and I would like to point out that they even then, because this was worldwide, it was in 95 that Marc Dutroux has been arrested in 96. And it was quite clear that this was a tremendous network delivering children to higher classes. Now, what did the Justice Department do? They started to split up the file in the one predator, and we're gonna trial him already. And all the other witnesses, there were thousands of them, also from networks and Pizzagate alike. Things have been put in Dutroux bis. You know, we're going to handle this later. Now we are 20 years later, nothing happened with it. Nothing. It is buried forever. So apparently they are above the law. Even justice is about the law. Now my question is, what do you think will be the outcome of your bravery, of those few who come out with these scandals of Pizzagate? Because for me it's nothing new. I hear this all the time, also in Europe. Considering that now you have the internet, it was not likely when the Savile case was in the United States or in France, this case, or Belgium, even Dutroux, it was 96, was the beginning of internet. But now we're in the midst of this tool that can spread this over the world. But still, my question is, what is going to be the outcome on a juridical basis? Are they going to be prosecuted? Are they going to be in trial? Are they going to have to justify what they did? are they going to be punished? That's my question. Thank you.
Let me put that in different terms. What do you think your work at its best will do as we go forward? What impact might it have in the most positive sense of the word?
Thank you both for the question there. I think that we hit a critical mass where these things cannot be looked away from. And with that critical mass, you will have some of the machinery of the state move in and go after at least some of these people because their crimes are so egregious that once you have millions of people on sites like 4chan and 8chan, millions of young people analytically discussing these things, and on Reddit, of course, you have millions of young people analytically discussing the Podesta emails and analytically going through the power structure of Lynn Rothschild and her family and how they financed the Clintons and how the Clintons had a voodoo doctor, right? The Clintons had a freaking witch doctor at their wedding. I mean, they've pieced it together so well, the young people. There are millions of millennials and sub-millennials, as I call them, people in their early 20s, who've just pieced it all together, and they're walking around with a nearly complete puzzle board, and they're turning on a mainstream media that is still in full, CIA Mockingbird mode. There's nothing wrong with Hollywood, right? Kevin Spacey's dad is not an alleged Nazi child rapist. They're trying to cover up this thing, which is already bursting at the seams. So I hope that what I did was increase public awareness because, if you look at my background, I'm a former Huffington Post, a former HuffPo, as you guys pointed out, former Business Insider. Before that, TheStreet.com, which is a financial publication on Wall Street. For a little while, Entrepreneur Magazine's website. So I'm not like a crop circle chaser, I'm not chasing the crop circles and looking for the interview with Bigfoot and all that. And to suddenly be attacked nonstop, oh, David Seaman, you're a crazy person. You're a crazy person to think that John Podesta is a bad person. Like, where is this coming from? It gave me a little taste for what some of the victims must go through when they do their gang stalking and all that of like, oh, you weren't abused, blah, blah, blah. That's how it functions. They have this organ of online harassment that then if you're influential enough, it extends into real world harassment. But to answer your question, we've seen the unsealed indictment, which was previously sealed. It was filed under seal by the court. We have seen the unsealed indictment of Keith Raniere, who is known as the Vanguard. He's the head of this weird sex cult in Canada, NXIVM. And if you look at some of their members are also active or past members of the Clinton Global Initiative. And many of their members are Hollywood actresses who are quite well connected politically. So it's all just one nasty spider web. And I think my work and many other people's work has helped that spider web just reach the light of day. And now what happens, I have no idea, right? We're in uncharted waters. But something's going to happen to some of these people. The machinery of the state is starting to work, at least in the case of Keith Raniere, because they were branding women and brainwashing them into a literal sex cult, right? I call it the Canadian Illuminati, and it involves the Bronfmans, one of the wealthiest families in Canada. This is a nasty spider web that goes out in a million directions.
David, thank you very much indeed. Are you happy with that answer,
Yes,
Commissioner? David, thank you. I would like to just suggest, and justices, please correct me if I'm out of line here, but it may be a propitious act if David considers an affidavit of truth in the coming days. If you wish to submit an affidavit of truth, which could be notarized virtually with the court, and submit some or all of the names that you feel ought to be named, albeit we will not be naming them ourselves. We will be retaining that in the court record under affidavit of truth. That may afford some degree of protection for brave individuals like David Seaman. It's entirely a matter for you, David, but whilst you're here, if that's something which made sense to you.
Yeah, well, certainly everything I've reported on is the truth. Everything I've said is truthful. So I'm happy to sign any kind of digital affidavit. As for naming names, I have no secrets. I've been very clear. I think there's something wrong with the Podesta brothers. I think there's something wrong with the Clintons and many connected to the Clintons. Those are the big names. I've been very vocal about that. And the fact that now 15 or 16 months into this bizarre scandal, not so much as the cease and desist letter from John Podesta or his brother, which would be the first step in getting me to be quiet, the first step in shutting down Fulcrum's coverage of this, would be a simple cease and desist letter from any lawyer on the planet Earth. Now, nearly 16 months in, our videos have been viewed millions of times, walking people through the Podesta emails and this bizarre code language that's known to federal law enforcement to be used by human traffickers, especially child traffickers. Not so much as a cease and desist. I can tell you what, if somebody did this to me, if somebody was accusing me of saying things in my emails that are, criminal to this extent, I would have a statement within a week, right? I would have a public statement within a week, and then my lawyers would be serving cease and desist letters to let people know if you're going to publish this, there's going to be a response. That hasn't come from the wealthy Podesta brothers, the wealthy Podestas who have access to millions of dollars and many legal resources. Nothing. Why is that? Well, we all know why.
We are the power behind the ITNJ. Add your voice. Sign the treaty.